1, 2, 3, 4, I think.
Kind of all washed out a little bit.
Someplace. Help for her.
That helps. Yeah. I think it does. Let me back this up a little tad. How are we seeing here? Whoops. Good enough.
Oh, I feel very short.
Welcome to the 5th episode of our Backyard Brothers podcast. We are live together in Arkansas, and we have a guest, the Backyard Father. We are happy to be together. As Dustin said last week, I don't think this group has been physically together years,
Probably
3 years?
Year,
at least.
almost 2 years. Well,
It's
almost
just
3
2
years.
years? Okay.
Yeah, almost 3 years. It's probably my wedding.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, so almost 3 years. 3 years in March.
Okay, yeah. So we're happy to be together, and this is a different kind of format than we're used to because we're obviously live. We don't have a time limit, although we're going to keep ourselves to a time limit. I believe we only have 4 topics to go through today. And so, as we've been doing the last 3 weeks, we have memories, and we've asked our guest to come up with a memory, and I think we're all going to share that. And so, Dad, you've talked about how you became a fan.
Yeah, I have been a fan of the Kansas City Chiefs for about 50 plus years. And the memory I have about that and why is when I was about 10, I think a few weeks before I turned 10, Kansas City was playing Minnesota in the Super Bowl. I think it was Super Bowl 3 or 4. And they didn't have much of a pregame show back then, but at least they had one. And they had an Indian chief floating around in a hot air balloon. And I imagine it was a makeshift hot air balloon, just in like the parking lot or something. But I thought that was the coolest thing ever for a 9 or 10-year-old kid. And in Utah, we didn't have a football team. So Kansas City became my football team.
Okay.
It took many years since then. They won that Super Bowl, by the way, but they didn't win one until they beat San Francisco 3 years ago.
Yeah. Okay.
So, a little bit more like, Cody, you're a big fan of the Seahawks.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share in that same memory, how did you become a Seahawks fan? What was that moment? What was your Indian chief in a hot air balloon moment?
So I didn't have a team that I connected to very well at all growing up until I was, it was 2011 or 2012. The Seahawks was Marshawn Lynch. Watching him play was just phenomenal for me. I really enjoyed him. So it was really the player that kind of got me to watch the Seahawks more, and that was really cool and fun to watch him. And if you guys remember watching that Beastquake kind of stuff, that kind of stuff, watching that happen, it was really neat and fun player to watch. And then I got to serve a church mission for my church, and I was sent to Tacoma, Washington, and that kind of sealed the deal for me. And as I was up in that area, although it rains too much for me, the area is beautiful, and I got to meet a lot of fans, a lot of diehard Seahawks fans that, painting their vans and trucks and houses, their colors, and it was just a really fun place to be. And I was there during the Super Bowl that they played the Patriots and lost in devastating fashion, as we're all aware of. And I was there when that happened, and it was just so much fun to be in a city or in an area experiencing a Super Bowl. And so that kind of sealed the deal for me. And ever since then, it's been Seahawks all the way.
And I imagine the whole city shut down to watch the Super Bowl, and probably every Sunday.
Yep,
Right.
yep. It was every Sunday it was shut down, but especially on that Super Bowl Sunday, we were told not to go out. Don't mess with people because it was
Doesn't
there.
bother
It
anybody.
was that day especially. You might get shot. So anyway,
And that would be justifiable.
it would be, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I'm a fan of a couple of different teams and a couple of different sports, but the 49ers, growing up in Utah until I was 12, at that point, like Dad said, Utah does not have a football team. And so the ones that I felt I had to choose from regionally were either the 49ers out west or the Broncos out east. And there was something about the 49ers. There was a guy named Steve Young and Jerry Rice that were connecting on so many great throws. I wasn't real. I mean, I was alive, but I was 2 years old when Joe Montana was throwing to Rice. But I was there when Young was throwing, and that he was so much fun to watch. He was the precursor for the scrambling quarterbacks. You don't think too much about Steve Young running as much as he did, but he did. He ran a lot, and he was fun to watch run and pick up first downs with his legs, and then he was so accurate with the ball. He never missed. He was throwing it to Jerry Rice, who always caught it, and it was so much fun to watch. They were one of the best teams in the league at that point. I think they won 2 or 3 Super Bowls during that time, and it was a lot of fun to watch. I remember a couple of those playoff games against the Packers and another one against the Cowboys. They lost to the Packers when the Packers went on to lose to the Broncos in the Super Bowl. But it was just so much fun. And I was too young when the 49ers won their last Super Bowl, though. It was 1994. I was 6 years old. I don't think I cared too much. And so I have not really cared. So I haven't been alive, or I shouldn't say that. I haven't been football cognizant at a time where the 49ers have won a Super Bowl yet. And so every year they're up there. This
The
year,
closest was 3 years ago
when they lost to the Chiefs, yeah. And this is another close year, depending on what happens. They should progress far. But in basketball, real quick, and I think this might take some of Dustin's story, so I'll cut this off a little bit. But I was in Utah when the Jazz had John Stockton and Karl Malone. And that was still to this day. A few years ago, the Nuggets and the Jazz played in the first round of the playoffs, and I live near Denver. And so I was like, who am I going to cheer for? Well, I'll find out. And so watching the game, and it was pretty clear early on, I'm still a Jazz fan. So
I think for me, as someone that follows basketball the most, I remember it was in 2008, the Boston Celtics made it to the NBA Finals and played against Los Angeles Lakers. And this was the huge meeting point. And this is kind of where I feel like my love of basketball got cemented, seeing what was called the Boston Three Party, and Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, and Kevin Garnett, the super team going against Kobe Bryant and the Lakers. And it was a fantastic showing of basketball by the Celtics, and watching that as a 17-year-old kid just fell in love with the game of basketball at that point, and loved the Celtics. And I ended up living in Boston for a couple of years doing my church mission there, and being around during that was fun. And then I've been able to go to a lot of basketball games, specifically out in Utah. And so the Celtics and the Jazz, being able to watch those games live, it just cemented that love for basketball and the love for those two teams in particular.
I remember that, and I was serving a mission in Las Vegas during that time, and everyone's a Lakers fan over there. And so it was a similar thing. You would knock on doors, and they say, "Go away, game's on." And so that, and everyone's a Raiders fan over there for some reason too. But before they even moved to Las Vegas, by the way, they were already Raiders fans. But I remember similar things watching the Pistons play the Lakers in the NBA Finals in 2004, and I really gained a bigger love of beyond the Jazz, just watching a different team that played defense better than any other team that I've ever seen.
Yeah, and I'd throw my opinion in there and say Ben Wallace is the greatest defender to ever play the game of basketball.
And that was a Lakers team that included Gary Payton and Karl Malone and all of these stars, and they blitzed right through the Western Conference, met the Pistons, and then got beat. Were they swept or was it 4-1? But it was that defense of the Pistons was just rock solid.
Yeah, with that series, it was rare even at that time for a game's final score to be 78-72, but it would be. The Pistons would win games scoring less than 80 points.
So I became a Jazz fan a little earlier because in, I think it was 81 is when they moved from New Orleans to Utah. And apparently it cost money to change names because why would there be a Utah Jazz? But it was. And
Everyone knows
the Jazz were, if not the worst team in the league, one of the worst. And so they were worried about filling up the old Salt Palace at the time, which doesn't exist anymore. And so they sold the corner seats of the arena for $5. And then they did a special 2-for-1. And they wouldn't sell me season tickets. I had to show up, and I bought season tickets. First day they would sell single game tickets but for $2.50 each. I had 2 tickets to the first season of the Utah Jazz, and I kept them for 3 or 4 years until they got a little bit better and the prices went up, and I couldn't afford it anymore.
So they drafted a couple of players in 83 and 84 that made them a little bit better.
Yes.
A couple of Hall of Famers.
I think that if I were to, I'm not a huge follower of basketball. I do enjoy it to an extent. If I were to choose a team, it would also be the Jazz. I've been to a few of their games, as well as a Thunder game, thanks to Dustin over here. But on one of those occasions that I went to a Jazz game, I went for my work, and they got tickets for everyone to go, including being able to go on the court after the game and meet with meet a couple players. I didn't get to meet any of them, but I got to meet cheerleaders, and that was cool too. But it was kind of neat to be able to go onto the court afterwards and shoot the ball around that they were playing with, and be on the court that these stars that were just on. I'm sure we'll talk about.
Well, it's different being able to meet those players. As covering some Jazz games as a reporter during a playoff push in 2012, 13, Al Jefferson, Paul Millsap, that group of players, Gordon Hayward when he was young. Anyway, they made the playoffs that year, and I was covering their last playoff push, and so I would go into the locker room, and DeMar Carroll, other ones like that. Anyway, go into the locker room, and suddenly you realize these NBA players are different. They all look 8 feet tall. Gordon Hayward looks like this little kid that can knock over a pincushion when it looks on the court. But up close, the guy's all in 300 pounds. This is what he looks, all muscle. The guy's huge. And it's different looking at these players firsthand. Just normal sized human beings and these giants over there. All of them, like even the tiny point guards. Stephen Curry is 6'4", and he looks like a little kid running around through people's legs out there. But
It was weird. I met Stockton, and I could look at him eye to eye. He's not the 6'2" or whatever they listed him at, and that just made him more impressive that he could play against these giants and even dominate a game.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So our agenda today is to talk about Franco Harris first, and Cody, you're up on that one.
Yeah. So Franco Harris, if you guys have looked at the news at all, you've seen that he just passed away at 72. this last week or 2 weeks ago or so. And he played running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers in 1972, I believe it was. Played there for 13 seasons. And he was a four-time. He appeared in 4 Super Bowls, 9-time Pro Bowl, and also one of the key players, if not the key player, in the Immaculate Reception. And in the Immaculate Reception, so I'll just introduce this real quick and I'll hear your guys' thoughts on Franco Harris. It was so Terry Bradshaw was the quarterback, and this was the AFC divisional game. It was against John Madden's Oakland Raiders, and it was Terry Bradshaw was throwing the pass, and John Fuqua, safety, hit him in the helmet and bounced off, and Franco Harris was able to grab it right before it hit the ground and ran for a game-winning touchdown. It was their first playoff win too.
It was like 4th down and forever.
It was something like, it was crazy. Like
20 seconds left in the game or something.
It was this is it, and it looked like it was a blown play. It was a blown play, and Franco Harris just saved the day. And so it's probably one of the most noteworthy plays in football history. And so I want to hear your guys' thoughts on the legacy and the legend of who he is.
Yeah, thinking of that, specifically of that play, is they said it's 4th down, 20 seconds left in the game. There's the only shot is to connect on a pass and hope it goes. And then, it bounces off of a helmet, flies in the air, and it's like, oh, okay. And then, Franco Harris nearly scoops it off of the ground, barely catches it, and runs it in for a touchdown. And that sent them to the Super Bowl, which they ended up winning. And so it's one of those plays that is just it's in the history of the NFL and is fun to relive. And so as we think about the passing of Franco Harris, it's just one of those that go back and watch it again and just think, wow, this cemented a legacy in football history and created new football fans, kind of like we were talking about how we became a fan. There's probably a lot of people out there that saw that and said, wow, I'm a fan of football now. We're a fan of the Steelers now.
Mm-hmm. A couple things. It's another. We see these types of plays. The Hail Mary that Aaron Rodgers throws, that guy bats down right into the arm of his receiver who runs it in for a touchdown. It's the same idea. This happens once every other season, something like this. It doesn't happen often, but it's an amazing play, and all of them trace back to this one play in 1972. It's the Hail Mary of all Hail Marys, saying it's got to be knocked down, bounced around, someone's going to catch it like Franco Harris did that one time, right? And that's what everyone thinks of. Most of the time, you hear all the announcers and analysts say, just knock it down, don't try to catch the ball. But that's kind of what Fuqua did, right? He tried to knock it down, and he knocked it into Franco Harris's hands, essentially. Mm-hmm. So maybe you do catch it. Don't let someone else have another opportunity. I don't know. I don't know what the best strategy is. The other thing, just in terms of context, none of us were alive when Franco Harris even retired. You were, but so beyond the 1972 game when you were 12, do you remember Franco Harris playing you on that?
Yeah, and I don't remember that game. I mean, I remember knowing of it, but I don't remember watching it like that. And I'm not sure. I didn't think they went on to win the Super Bowl back then in 72, 73, whenever. But they became, one of the dominant teams, and then they won 4 Super Bowls in the next 6 or 8 years. I can't remember which years, but throughout the 70s, they were the team, the Kansas City Chiefs of the 70s right now. So they were always going to be there. Mm-hmm. The steel curtain. Yeah. They gave the line some the due that they needed. That was fun. And it's always fun to have a couple dominant teams, either that you can love or love to hate.
Mhm.
Either way, it makes it a lot more fun.
Good. Yeah, let's switch over back to basketball and talk about the Utah Jazz. We talked about them a little bit already, but let's analyze the trades that happened over the summer. Probably the biggest team reset, team rebuild that's happened in several years. Traded away half of the team, and as a result, have amassed 13 first-round draft picks over the next 7 years. So almost averaging 2 draft picks per season, which is it's crazy to think about, and it's right out of Danny Ainge's playbook, which is he did that with the Celtics in 2013, I believe, and now he's working with the Jazz and
Where you got Tatum and Brown back
Yep.
first round drafts.
Yeah, and so players like that came from the same strategy, and so we could look to the future of the Jazz and say, hey, it's possible that in the next 6 to 10 years that they're a top team in the West with all the draft picks that they have. But since we're living in the current era, let's look at the current season, and it's very surprising to see the Utah Jazz in this rebuild are currently sitting 7th in the West with a 19-16 record. Surprisingly good. Everyone expected them to be very bottom, but here they are, middle of the pack, surprisingly good. And then some of the teams that they do, Rudy Gobert went to the Timberwolves, who are 10th in the West at 16-17. And then they also traded with the Lakers, who are 13-20, 13th in the West.
Who did they trade to the Lakers?
It was part of a 3-team trade, but they got several players from them, including Taylor and Horton Tucker.
Yeah.
Traded Donovan Mitchell to the Cavaliers, got Lauri Markkanen in return, and Colin Sexton, yes. Cavaliers are doing great. They're 3rd in the East at 22-12. Made trades with Brooklyn in that 3-team trade. Sent Royce O'Neal to Brooklyn, who are currently 4th at 21-12. And then the Pistons, where they got Kelly Olynyk and sent Bogdanovich. And Pistons are last in the East at 8-27, bottom of the league. And so all these different teams all had a hand in these trades, and you could look at the shakeout and say, hey, Jazz are doing pretty good. A lot of the teams that they traded with are not doing quite so well, with the exception of the Cavaliers and the Nets. And just thoughts on these kind of trades, what they do, and is this surprising? All the teams where they've shaken out, are we meeting expectations?
Across all sports, that when he decides to rebuild, he rebuilds hard. He sends everyone out and says, I want to make this my team. He gets the players he wants, and most of all, he gets those draft picks for the future. But it had been talked about for at least the last 2 or 3 off seasons that this Gobert-Mitchell pairing was going to crumble sooner or later, because they had some ego issues, they had some chemistry issues. It was going to happen, and I believe there were salary cap issues inherited from the last general manager as well. And so it seemed at first like a really bad idea. You're sending your best players, Gobert, Mitchell, Bogdanovich, your big 3 gone within a couple of weeks of each other. It seemed like a horrible idea, and we are resetting for bottom of the league for the next couple of years.
I didn't think they would win 10 games.
Yeah. But, I mean, the players that they got back, Lauri Markkanen is a great player, and he's proving it this year. Colin Sexton, good young player, great potential, and he's proving it again this year. Those are both from the Cavaliers trade. And they're getting a lot of good. They still have Clarkson off the bench, who's a 6th man of the year. a couple of years. Is he now starting out? I haven't been enough attention to that yet.
Yeah, they have him starting, and then Conley is still there.
That's right. Tom's still there too. And so they are bringing things together, and we got to give credit to their new coach as well of bringing that together. The Celtics assistant last year, can't remember his name right now. Hardy, yeah. Yeah, he's done a great job of bringing these guys together because it's really hard to, just play pickup basketball. Anytime you get guys together that have never played together, you usually get 5 guys shooting the ball at some point or another that don't pass to each other. Obviously, when you're in the NBA, you have a little bit more idea of what to do, but still, it's hard to get 5 guys who've never played together and say, go beat this team that's been together and developing for 4 years.
Yeah.
So,
it's, comment on that. It's, we look at this trade to say, oh, they're just blowing up and just bringing in all these role players. And you realize, hey, players like, Sexton and Markkanen, they were second best player on their team before. And so you bring a whole bunch of guys that were second best player on their team and put them together. That's a lot of talent. And so maybe we were expecting them at the bottom, but maybe we shouldn't be surprised that they're, middle of the West. Because you got a whole lot of talented second best player on the team guys now all on the same team.
I think my thought is actually it reminds me a little bit of the Seahawks this year, and what I mean by that is how they go and trade Russell Wilson, the best quarterback in franchise history. They cut Bobby Wagner. They don't trade him, but they cut him, and then Russell Wilson goes to the Broncos. They do terribly, and Bobby Wagner goes to the Rams, and they do terribly. And Seattle, although right now they have a losing record, their second is better than anyone expected. And so I think looking at that, I think it's kind of what happened there. That maybe there's this underdog mentality that's really beneficial. That people don't expect us to do well. There's not a whole lot of expectation on this season. Let's go out and just do our best shot in it, and this is what you get. So the Jazz being, I think, seventh seed, and then the Seahawks are second in the division there. And so I find some similarities there, and I think that's interesting. So I think it's the underdog mentality. I got to do my part and force the coach.
So how much do you think chemistry comes into play with either with each other players or with the coaching staff?
it has to have a factor. Martin and Sexton played together last year in Cleveland. There's that, but it's got to have some kind of factor where you have to learn to gel quickly.
Just see guys, it can be in different sports where they were either great with this team and then they go to a new team and they disappear, or vice versa, where it's just a so-so guy and now he flourishes. And even watching Baker Mayfield last night had the game of his life. And he still doesn't know where the playbook is. And that's not fair to him. He's probably studied for 10 straight days. But suddenly he looks like a whole different guy. And this may be the pinnacle of his career, and you never see a game like that again. I don't know, but something is different in that guy or that situation.
Yeah, I think, it's obviously this is their jobs, this is their work, this is a work environment, and I imagine all these new people coming together, it's, hey, we all feel this underdog mentality. You kind of, and the coaching staff does a great job of saying, hey, this is the goal. We just got to come together and work towards the goal. Or I imagine if you're the same guy, or even us in our normal jobs, you work with the same person for years and years, maybe you don't get along. Maybe it's hard to work with them. And we definitely saw that with Mitchell and Gobert. Watching last season, Mitchell did not pass to Gobert. He ignored him. It was 4-1 versus 5. Mitchell completely ignored Gobert, and they had terrible chemistry issues. And it would needed to happen. And so I think about this Jazz team and how they're coming together and working towards goal, and I hope that they can keep going. now we look at Gobert on the Timberwolves, and they're potentially falling out of playoff picture in the West. But look at Mitchell and Cleveland at third in the East, and obviously love to see the players that you rooted for doing well, whatever team they're on. And so I'm excited to see what happens with Cleveland this year with Donovan Mitchell there.
Yeah. Okay, we had a jazz sandwich between two football topics. So we are talking about some NFL playoff surprises and disappointments. So as we head into, next week is the second to last week of the season. We have some playoff locks that we thought it would be locks from the beginning of the offseason. The Bills are there, the Chiefs are there. On the other side, the Buccaneers are there, but that's not exactly it's more of a disappointment. The 49ers are there. Well, we all thought they would be as well. Those are kind of the three that we thought would be there, they're still there. There's some teams that have fallen off completely. Obviously, the Rams are the Super Bowl champions. They're already eliminated. They were eliminated 2 weeks ago. And it's more because all of their players are in training room right now. Everyone's injured over there. But what is the biggest surprise and what is the biggest disappointment? Those are the questions for everyone here in the playoffs right now. And I'll finish up with mine.
I'll start. I think the big surprise on both sides for me right now are Jacksonville and the AFC. They're leading their division. 2 weeks left, and they probably to keep it up though.
They play the Titans in the last week of the season,
so we'll probably put a handle on it. And then also the Giants surprised me. I was wondering how much of an impact Brian Dable would make immediately, and I knew he was a good coach. I knew that he would make a difference, but I didn't think it'd be this quickly on the first season. I didn't expect that turnaround, to be honest. And so that's really exciting and surprising. As far as disappointments, as mentioned earlier, I'm really surprised that Denver's done as bad as they have, and we can point fingers at Russell Wilson and Nathaniel Hackett. For some reason, and I don't know if anyone really knows why. Russell Wilson has played worse than pretty much any other quarterback in the league right now. For me, those are my surprises and my disappointment.
Just thinking, other than Zach Wilson, you're probably right.
That's true.
But I was pleased to see Detroit play so well, and they kind of lost to, two of the last three or something, so they're in danger now. That's fun. And Jacksonville, it's fun to see the quarterback come into himself and play real well. It's not unusual to have one or two of the teams that play in the Super Bowl not even make the playoffs, but to see the Rams just not even have a team. And I think it is different because it's injuries, but still, usually the elite teams have some pretty good backups and are able to work through that. Maybe not to the extent that they have this time.
Yeah, I agree with Jacksonville being a surprise that I'm very happy about. And we talked about chemistry, and look at Trevor Lawrence and the chemistry he's developed with ETN and other players that is really making successful. And like you mentioned, watching the quarterback come into his zone, I was on the side of whenever Lawrence did not do well at all last season, kind of like, I told you, I knew it. I knew he was going to be a bust. And now you see him, and he's really coming into his own and has the potential to be a great quarterback for years to come. For me, I think the biggest surprise that I'm happy about is Philadelphia. What are they, 13-2 or something like that? Just absolutely fantastic team. Jalen Hurts, it's absolutely the MVP conversation. And so I love to see that team do well and do they have the best record in the league? They have the best record in the league, which it's the NFC East. You expect, hey, they'll make record with, make the playoffs with a 9-8 record or something like that. But instead, they're 13-2, and have the potential to continue to have best record and
I think you finished the number 1 seed next week.
number 1 seed and home field
Yeah.
advantage.
Whole division would be in the playoffs right
Still.
now,
I
still.
was gonna say NFC Beast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it may end up being that way because the Lions and the Seahawks keep losing too. And so we're letting those 2 teams be there, or those 4 teams. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, I was also going to mention the Eagles, but I think I'm going to mention the whole division itself is a big surprise. This is a division. A couple of years ago, the then were they Redskins or were they just the football team at that point? They got into the playoffs, I think, at 9-8, and every other team was out of it. There were some injuries that happened in Dallas, and Philadelphia was changing coaches and all that. And this team has not had back-to-back division winners since the Philadelphia Eagles did it in 2004 and 2005. It's been switching the division champion every single year, including this year. The Eagles are going to win the division. It doesn't matter if the Cowboys won. The Cowboys have to win the rest of their games. The Eagles have to lose the rest of their games for the Cowboys to win the division. That's not going to happen. Eagles are going to win that division. They're going to win. But that whole division could make the playoffs, like we just talked about. It's been a huge surprise that all 4 teams have done as well as they have. Cody talked about the Giants. They've switched from 4-13 last year to winning at least 8 this year. The Commanders are doing well enough. That whole division is just really, really, really good. The biggest disappointment on the other side of the Jaguars is the Titans, to me. They had that division locked up about as much as 2 months ago. They had the division locked up, and they've lost 5 in a row now, and they're out of the playoffs. Their quarterback's hurt, but they still have Derrick Henry there. They should be able to win games. He's the guy that leads that team. That team is falling completely off the rails, and I'm not sure who's really at fault. If it's a coaching thing with Mike Vrabel or what. But that if they don't get their act together, they're going to miss the playoffs completely after having it locked up 2 months ago.
Danny Ainge might have some ideas on what to do with that.
Yeah. Any other quick topics from anyone?
Just going with surprises real quick. I just want to add a surprise that Geno Smith is a Pro Bowler this year. Anyone expect that?
No.
That's a surprise on a player level of things. As a Seahawks fan, I can say I'm just as surprised as the next person.
So, quick topic, quick question. This upcoming Saturday, TCU and Michigan, then it's Ohio State and Georgia. I think can all 4 of us say Georgia will probably win that game? That they're perhaps the best team in the NCAA. And then the TCU Michigan, is there any of us that thinks TCU can win that game?
No. And to make it undefeated, you've got to get lucky a couple times. But I watched a couple of TCU games that they had no business winning. Well, just like, although I watched Tampa Bay win the last 2 games, I guess, they had no business even being in the game. And so it does take some luck, and it does take that, hey, we've done this before, we can do it again, an attitude. But no, I don't expect them to win.
No, it should be a Michigan-Georgia final.
Yeah,
Ohio State has a better chance than TCU.
I was gonna say it would be exciting to see TCU win and go like that. I don't think they will win. And this could be something we can talk about later and more in depth. I do think it'll be a Michigan-Georgia game, but I do expect a Michigan upset. That Michigan will win against Georgia. After I predicted that, and I might be so wrong, but I think that Michigan could pull it off. Anyway.
Most of the country would be.
Yeah.
They surprised me when they beat Ohio State.
Like 27 points, right?
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, Dad. This is our first guest. We'll have more. But
Well, Steve Young couldn't make it. So.
we tried. Okay. Well, thanks everyone, and we'll publish this on our YouTube page as well, and see if we can get the audio for our podcast as well.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.
Yeah, that was good. That was fun.